Joined by Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Hugh. Good to have you back inside the actual swamp. You know, swamp before all the influence peddling and grifting.
I've got to get back out of the swamp soon because last night's storm was an indication of what's going on. I'm going to talk about the Senate Judiciary Committee in a moment, but first, it is clear after I've checked my records. We had our 22nd anniversary of this nationally syndicated radio show on Monday, which is also the day after the 40th anniversary of the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt saying yes to me in getting married. And you have been, I believe, the most frequent appearing guest who is an elected official. For 11 years now, you've been making a near weekly appearance on the Hugh Hewitt Show. So I think that means you've talked to Dwayne more than anybody in the world except Adam and me.
Well, I appreciate, Hugh, your generosity in having me on. I guess it started 11 years ago this summer during my first campaign for the House. I'm grateful for your willingness to have me on the show to speak to your big audience, to include your listeners in Arkansas. I just wonder, you know, if after having a misspent youth, I'm also having a misspent adulthood coming on your show so much.
Last night I'm in town. Last night I did an event with Governor and Mrs. Youngkin in front of a crowd that included a member of your staff, and it's off the record, so I won't talk about it. But I got to say, I know you campaigned hard for him. He's quite a remarkable leader, and the Republican bench is deep and wide. And any thought cross your mind you might be across the debate stage from Glenn Youngkin in the near term?
Well, Hugh, I don't know about that. I think you're referring to the 2024 election, and as my drill sergeants always told us, keep your eye on the 25-meter target, which right now is the 2022 election. But I'm extremely grateful that the people of Virginia elected Glenn Youngkin last year. Anna and I are friends with Glenn and Suzanne. They're a wonderful couple. He's a great leader for Virginia, a great, decent Christian man. And the people of the Commonwealth of Virginia couldn't be more fortunate to have such a good conservative leader as Glenn Youngkin.
Now, the reason I bring this up, I want to cover two things with you. One, the extraordinary hearing in Senate Judiciary yesterday on abortion. I think the reason Governor Youngkin won is that Virginia's parents, they're usually apolitical, centrist parents, are disgusted with woke ideology. They don't want it. And he spoke about it last night. Chatham House rules, can't mention it. But I wonder whether or not you think that exchange and your exchange and the entire hearing yesterday with the Berkeley law professor and the other witnesses underlines for America just how crazy academia has become.
Yeah, that hearing was something else. I don't think it went quite the way the Democrats had hoped, Hugh. You had three Democratic witnesses who were defending abortion up to the moment of birth. You know, I asked them if they condemned the violence against crisis pregnancy centers and the mobs that are protesting outside the homes of Supreme Court justices in violation of federal law. A Democratic hitman even tried to kill Brett Kavanaugh. And while they all said they condemned that, they also insisted that we have to recognize that a forced pregnancy is violence as well. No reports from them on whether late-term partial birth abortion is violence against an unborn baby. You know, they all started their testimony by offering their pronouns, and one in particular retreated from the grounds that we are here to talk not about women's rights, but about persons who are capable of becoming pregnant. It just sounds to normal Americans like people speaking a different language. And that's one reason why the Democratic Party is so out of touch with normal Americans. And as you say, that's one reason why Glenn made big inroads in the Northern Virginia suburbs, typically pretty Democratic areas. Is you had schools there shut down for a year and a half. And the only silver lining of all of the suffering inflicted on those kids is parents were able to see the kind of nonsense and left-wing drivel being indoctrinated into their kids. And they didn't want it, and they wanted to change, and that's why they elected Glenn Youngkin in part.
I think we are at peak woke. It now begins to destroy itself because it's on display, and that's my proposition. I'm sticking to it. Do you agree with me that if Democrats refuse to say that women are women and men are men and only women can have babies, that they will suffer at the polls because Americans are not in to the hard left ideology of, it's called critical legal studies, and you came out of its birthplace, Harvard Law School, and critical legal studies became critical race theory, became critical birth theory. It's just crazy.
It is crazy, Hugh, and I can't say if we're at peak woke or not. That's really not in our hands. It's in the hands of the Democrats, whether or not they want to start sounding like normal people again and defending the interest of normal people. Because remember, Hugh, it's not just saying silly things like persons who are capable of becoming pregnant. It's also neglecting the priorities of working class Americans in favor of their abstract academic concerns. Those things are $5 a gallon gas, or grocery costs that are through the roof, moms not being able to get formula for their babies, skyrocketing crime, an open border. That's what most Americans are worried about these days. They're not worried about whether we are disrespecting persons who are capable of becoming pregnant by calling them women. They're not worried about whether or not one or two men who identify as women get to compete against girls. They're worried about whether their girls get a fair shot to compete and succeed in sports and those kind of issues. Just look, Hugh, at the gains we've made in the 2020 election and all the special elections since then. I predict will make this fall among Latino voters. Apparently, the biggest priority among Democrats is whether they get called Latino or Latinx or Latinx or however you pronounce that ridiculous word they came up with, a word which, by the way, virtually no Latino has ever heard or wants to be called. But these are the priorities of the Democrats, not the working class Americans' priorities.
It's the coercion of the vast majority of Americans into an obligatory left speak. Senator, I have a new column in the Washington Post today. It's the third and final column in three that I've written about West Virginia versus EPA. Probably, I know Dobbs matters, the gun case matters, the religious freedom case matters, but West Virginia versus EPA, which is a 6-3 vote in favor of tossing out the clean air regs that Joe Biden is making up, like President Obama made them up, without authority. And the Supreme Court said, if you want to regulate, you've got to have a writ from Congress. Now, I want big tech regulated. Do you think it is best to invest one of the existing agencies with that authority or to stand up a new agency with a very precise definition of what they should do?
Well, Hugh, first I want to say I agree that West Virginia, the EPA, is a huge case for the American people and for the cause of their self-government. These unelected bureaucrats, little Wilsonian scolds like Tony Fauci, think that they can find dusty corners of laws that go back 50 or 75 years that give them authority to regulate vast swaths of our economy and our private lives. It's absurd. In West Virginia, the EPA was claiming the ability under a 50-year-old law to regulate the entire power generation industry in America, as opposed to this or that power plant which may have issues with its emissions. Obviously, Congress didn't intend that when they passed the Clean Air Act. But, Hugh, it's just like the powers that Tony Fauci and the CDC claim that they were trying to impose an eviction moratorium nationwide last summer. The Supreme Court simply said if these bureaucrats want to exercise such sweeping powers, they have to have the clear authorization of Congress to do so. Now, on the question about big tech, I, for one, don't think it's a good idea to empower these bureaucrats with more discretion. That's one reason why I have not sponsored some of the bills that would do so, because I don't want Joe Biden's left-wing, politically correct bureaucrats making those decisions. I think what will result is even more censorship of conservative voices. What Congress could do is adopt some very clear, bright-line laws, like I propose to do. For instance, once these tech companies get to a certain size, they simply can no longer grow by acquisition. It would simply block mergers and acquisitions. There's no discretion there. It's a very simple test. I think that would be a better approach than empowering people like Lena Khan at the Federal Trade Commission to impose their far-left ideology under the pretext of economic regulation.
Now, Senator, let me follow up on that. I do not believe any existing agency has the authority to do anything significant with big tech, maybe other than the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. However, I am concerned about the national security implications of the technologies being developed in Silicon Valley and like-minded companies and like-mission companies across the United States being sold to our enemies. Maybe you empower the Department of Defense to control that. I know there are some agencies that do technology transfer at Treasury, et cetera, but we got 1 minute. What do we do about the privacy of Americans and the security of Americans when it comes to big tech?
Well, Hugh, given some of the left-wing bureaucrats in charge of the Department of Defense under Joe Biden, not sure we want to empower them either. Now, Congress has acted in this space, though, Hugh. Just a few years back, maybe 2018, 2019, we passed major reforms to foreign investment and export control laws. And we did empower something called the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States to scrutinize much more carefully Chinese investment into America, because oftentimes it flies under the radar. It's happening with very small startup companies. We have to stop China from stealing our best technology and using it against us.
We will return to this subject in the next 11 years of Senator Cotton's appearances. Thank you, Senator, for being a regular guest. We actually appreciate you a lot more than any other elected official because you've stuck with us through 11 years of pointed questionings, and that's great. Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, member of the Judiciary Committee, Armed Services, and Intel. I'll be right back, America's